Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share, and restack buttons. Well, you need to pay attention because the end times world just arrived. And when I say that, I'm not saying that the tribulation has arrived. I want to be clear about that. But what I mean is we're seeing developments take place on the ground that give us a glimpse of exactly what the tribulation world will look like. And I want to focus on one particular aspect today, and that is warfare. How human beings engage in warfare. We're seeing a radical shift and change in how that takes place. And I believe in short order, that will lead to the Antichrist global empire as prophesied in the books of Daniel and Revelation. So we'll connect those dots as we work through this. But what am I talking about when I say the end times world has just arrived? Well, I'm talking about this right here. This article says AI begins ushering in an age of killer robots. It says in a field on the outskirts of Kiev, the founders of Vyry, a Ukrainian drone company, were recently at work on a weapon of the future. Well, it's not really a weapon of the future, it's a weapon of the present. But those weapons of the future are coming. It says to demonstrate it, Alexei Babenko, 25, Vyry's chief executive, hopped on his motorcycle and rode down a dirt path. Behind him, a drone followed as a colleague tracked the movements from a briefcase-sized computer. Until recently, a human would have piloted the quadcopter. No longer. Instead, after the drone locked onto its target, Mr. Babenko, it flew itself, guided by software that used the machine's camera to track him. The motorcycle's growling engine was no match for the silent drone as it stalked Mr. Babenko. Push, push, more. Pedal to the metal, man, his colleagues called out over a walkie-talkie as the drone swooped toward him. If the drone had been armed with explosives, and if his colleagues hadn't disengaged the autonomous tracking, Mr. Babenko would have been a goner. Vyry is just one of many Ukrainian companies working on a major leap forward in the weaponization of consumer technology, driven by the war with Russia. And guys, that's the key here. We talked about that when this conflict began, that it would incentivize pushing the envelope on the development of these weapons systems in the same way that we saw World War I push the development of technologies that were already there, but the incentive to develop them quickly wasn't there because it wasn't a matter of life and death, right? I mean, you think about if you're working on a project and you say, okay, we'd like to build this weapon system for some future war. Bob's out on vacation next week. And, Mirabelle, she's got to go out on vacation the week after. And so, we'll set a deadline that's 8 months in the future. We're working, 9 to 5 days. But it totally transforms if your country is in the midst of a life and death struggle for survival. You're not taking vacations to the beach. You're not limiting yourself to 9 to 5 work days. You're not taking long coffee breaks. You're urgently working toward achieving your goal, which compresses that timeline significantly. So just as we saw cavalry used at the beginning of World War I, but it was all mechanized tanks by the end, well, we're going to see the same thing with Ukraine. We are seeing the same thing with Ukraine. As many of you know, that is now a drone-dominated battlefield. And that's exactly what this article is telling us, but those drones are developing at a rapid pace. This goes on. It says, the pressure to outthink the enemy, along with huge flows of investment, donations, and government contracts, has turned Ukraine into a Silicon Valley for autonomous drones and other weaponry. What the companies are creating is technology that makes human judgment about targeting and firing increasingly tangential. The widespread availability of off-the-shelf devices, easy-to-design software, powerful automation algorithms, and specialized artificial intelligence microchips has pushed a deadly innovation race into uncharted territory, fueling a potential new era of killer robots. And they only miss one thing there. They need to take out the word potential. Fueling a new era of killer robots. We're in it. There's no potential there. We're in the early rudimentary stages of drone warfare and swarm warfare, but we're seeing that develop. It's going to develop exponentially as time goes on. We'll talk about why that is and what some of the key developments are that we should be looking for. But they talk about the incentives within this article of why the Russia-Ukraine conflict is bumping up these timelines. It's really pushing people to innovate. So it says, I want to focus on this too. This is in the middle of it. It says, because this is the key. This is something we've been talking about for years. If you've been watching this channel, if you've been reading the articles I've put out for 2 decades now on this very topic, this is what we've talked about. This is where the world is headed, buried right here in this article, but most people are completely unaware of what's coming. And even this article, I think, is just sort of dancing around it and doesn't understand the implications. It says the systems raise the stakes in an international debate about the ethical and legal ramifications of AI on the battlefield. Human rights groups and United Nations officials want to limit the use of autonomous weapons for fear that they may trigger a new global arms race that could spiral out of control. So let's unpack that right now. There is a global arms race. It's being fueled. It's not a matter of we think it might be triggered. Again, just like potential, that word triggered needs to be brought out. We are in that arms race. Again, we are in the early days of that, relatively speaking. But the technology is advancing exponentially. And again, the key is this will fuel an arms race, but it's unlike some of the arms races we've seen in the past. For instance, during the Cold War, you would hear there's an arms race, meaning each side's spending massive amounts on the military, but you still had the doctrine of mutual assured destruction in place. Both sides had massive nuclear arsenals, so it prevented outright direct war between the Soviet Union and the United States, because both sides knew that would be the end of everything. They could not win that war. This arms race will overturn that doctrine of mutual assured destruction because nuclear weapons will become obsolete. Swarms, acting with artificial intelligence controlled by that, using quantum computers, because we're looking out into several years into the future, not right this second. But those things are coming, and they're coming rapidly. We're going to see the ability to disable other nations' nuclear capabilities. Once that happens, mutual assured destruction becomes obsolete. And that global arms race that the United Nations fears could spiral out of control will, if you have two competing powers that reach a point where they develop something called molecular manufacturing, which is going to enable the scaling of the type of technologies they're talking about here in the swarm drones, massive billions and trillions of swarming drones. You can't have two competing powers and not have them engage in a devastating end of the world, end of humanity, destructive war. Therefore, whoever develops that technology first, whoever wins that arms race, will use that capability to conquer the globe and prevent other competing powers from emerging. We've talked about this for many years, but the general public still remains unaware that this is just on the horizon. And so when that happens, we get the global empire prophesied in the books of Daniel and Revelation. So this article goes on. It talks about the incentives that the Russia-Ukraine war provide that lead to all of this. But there's some, again, like a lot of these articles, they tend to bury the lead at the end. So let's pick up toward the end and read what else they had to say. It says, on a drone range in May, Swarmer, another local company, held a video call with a military unit to walk soldiers through updates to its software, which enables drones to carry out swarming attacks without a pilot. The software from Swarmer, which was formed last year by a former Amazon engineer, was built on an AI model that was trained with large amounts of data on frontline drone missions. It enables a single technician to operate up to 7 drones on bombing and reconnaissance missions. Recently, Swarmer added abilities that can guide kamikaze attack drones up to 35 miles. The hope is that the software, which has been in test since January, will cut down on the number of people required to operate the miniaturized air forces that dominate the front lines. During a demonstration, a Swarmer engineer at a computer watched a map as 6 autonomous drones buzzed overhead. One after the other, large bomber drones flew over a would-be target and dropped water bottles in place of bombs. Some drone pilots are afraid they will be replaced entirely by the technology. They say, oh, it flies without us. They'll take away our remote controls and put a weapon in our hand, referring to the belief that it's safer to fly a drone than occupy a trench on the front. But I say no, you'll now be able to fly with 5 or 10 drones at the same time. The software will help them fight better. And guys, that's a key thing to think about. Like when we hear all of this talk about AI will destroy jobs, take away everybody's jobs, certainly it will take away some people's jobs, but often it's just going to make people more efficient. So you think about, we've already seen this. If you think about, well, it used to be if you were an engineer building a bridge, you'd be drawing on a piece of paper, and it might take a large team, however long, to do that, to develop those plans for that bridge. Now you have computers, and the computers can help increase the efficiency of that work, help make sure there's not clashes within that work, make sure that it goes faster. And so it doesn't eliminate the need for a bridge engineer. It just means that it takes less bridge engineers and you can build more bridges if you need to, right? You can do more things. It frees people up to do other things. And the same thing is true here. If you've got one person flying one drone, well, now you can have one person flying a swarm of drones and directing that swarm that, in this case, they're saying 5 to 10, but that's the number they're starting with, they're talking about now. Why not 500 to 1,000? Why not 500,000 or 1,000,000? There's nothing saying that can't happen, and there's nothing saying that the AI can't simply take orders from whatever targeting data it's given. And that's what they're saying here. Targeting data was provided, and the target 25 to 35 miles away was hit. So, and that's exactly what we saw in, they talk about the rise of the slaughter bots. It says in 2017, Mr. Russell, the Berkeley AI researcher, released an online film, Slaughter Bots, Warning of the Dangers of Autonomous Weapons. In the movie, roving packs of low-cost, armed AI drones use facial recognition technology to hunt down and kill targets. So if you haven't seen that movie, I'll provide a link in the comments, pin it at the top. Go watch that film because that gives you a perfect visual illustration of what is coming and in many ways is already here. Because what they're saying is they provided this targeting data to the drones and hit a target 25 miles away without having to remotely control and tell the drone where to go. And that's exactly what we saw in that film. So again, I encourage you to go watch that if you haven't seen that. But this goes on. It says, what's happening in Ukraine moves us toward that dystopian future, Mr. Russell said. He is already haunted, he said, by Ukrainian videos of soldiers who are being pursued by weaponized drones piloted by humans. I'm sure you've probably seen many of those. It is haunting to see. It says there's often a point when the soldiers stop trying to escape or hide because they realize they can't get away from the drone. There's nowhere for them to go, so they just wait around to die, Mr. Russell said. He isn't alone in fearing that Ukraine is a turning point. In Vienna, members of a panel of UN experts also said they're worried about the ramifications of the new techniques being developed in Ukraine. Officials have spent more than a decade debating rules about the use of autonomous weapons, but few expect any international deal to set regulations, especially as the United States, China, Israel, Russia, and others race to develop even more advanced weapons. That's the key, guys. There is an arms race, a critical one going on. Remember, Vladimir Putin in 2017 said, and he was speaking particularly about artificial intelligence, but it's these other technologies as well. Artificial intelligence will just help enable those to develop more quickly than they otherwise would. But he said, whoever wins that race will rule the world. That's his exact quote, will rule the world. And he is correct. I believe that will be the Antichrist kingdom when that takes place. It's not going to be Vladimir Putin in Russia, although I think he hopes that that will be the case. It says in one U.S. program announced in August, we've been talking about this, known as the Replicator Initiative, the Pentagon said it planned to mass produce thousands of autonomous drones. The geopolitics makes it impossible, said Alexander Kmet, Austria's top negotiator on autonomous weapons at the UN. These weapons will be used, and they'll be used in the military arsenal of pretty much everybody. Nobody expects countries to accept an outright ban of such weapons, he said, but they should be regulated in a way that we don't end up with an absolutely nightmare scenario. He doesn't go on to say what that nightmarish scenario is or what the regulations would be. When it's a matter of survival, when you're being attacked, you're going to do whatever you can. And so I don't understand what they think they're going to do that's going to stop this. It can't be stopped. This is a trajectory, a technological trend that we are on. And again, it leads directly to the overturning of mutual assured destruction, rendering it obsolete. And it leads to a world where whoever wins the race toward molecular manufacturing in particular will be able to scale up a military force almost overnight and use it to conquer the entire globe. Again, I've been writing about this for over 20 years. And if you've been following my work, you've been reading that. We've talked about it in countless videos over the past couple of years. But here they're starting to acknowledge that that's the world we're headed into. And I believe that's the end times world. That's why I'm saying the end times world just arrived. Doesn't mean we're not still a few years away from seeing molecular manufacturing come. That doesn't mean the rapture could come at any moment. But I believe that this in particular could be anywhere from a few months away to a few years away to where we see molecular manufacturing, and then all bets are off, everything changes. It says groups including the International Committee of the Red Cross have pushed for legally binding rules that prohibit certain types of autonomous weapons, restrict the use of others, and require a level of human control over decisions to use force. For many in Ukraine, the debate is academic. Exactly, they're outgunned and they're outmanned. We need to win first, Mr. Fedorov, the Minister of Digital Transformation, said. To do that, we'll do everything we can to introduce automation to its maximum to save the lives of our soldiers. Absolutely. So that's what every side is going to do, every nation's going to act in its best interest. They're going to continue to develop these technologies to their benefit, in their self-interest, because they know if they don't, the other side is, and they'll simply be a victim of the other nation state. But guys, again, one nation will win this race, just as Vladimir Putin said back in 2017, and will rule the world. Or could say one group of nations. And we know the Bible tells us that there will be 10 kings in the last days, so we don't know how that will be comprised. Will it be 10 leaders of actual nations? Will it be 10 rulers of certain areas of the globe? There's all sorts of different theories and ideas behind that. But ultimately, that group will win this race, because that's where we're headed. Once this takes place, we have global government, we have a global empire. Again, almost overnight. Most people are completely oblivious to all of this and how suddenly all of this could come upon them. And the Bible doesn't say anything about global empires that come before, like the ones prophesied in Daniel and in Revelation. So that tells us how close we are to the tribulation period. We're getting very close. So to get an idea of what are we talking about, let's help visualize where this is all going. And turn to this article. We've looked at this before as well. So this is from Prophecy Newswatch. It's titled "The Future of Warfare, Rise of Drones." This is an article I wrote back in 2018, so April 2018. And it talks about exactly where we would go with all of this. So it says the future of warfare, synchronized drones. So again, autonomous drones acting in a swarm. Let us see the future of warfare. Why do I say that? Let me ask you another question. Have you ever seen a large flock of birds flying in unison? They look like a cloud, and the whole flock can shift left, right, up, down, all in a split second. Despite their quick shifts, these birds act as one. They aren't disorganized or disjointed. They fly in perfect harmony, as if they have a single mind. And again, you could point out, you could shoot one of those birds. I mean, I don't know why you want to do that, but you could take out one of those birds or any other flock like that, and it continues to act. There isn't a centralized mind. They act as if the group has a single mind. It says we observe similar behavior in schools of fish, bees, locusts, gnats, and all sorts of animals. Now imagine one of these groups is coming to get you. That's right. Imagine a swarm of bees is coming after you. Would a shotgun do you much good? Well, not really. You can fire into a swarm of bees and you might take out one or more. Keep in mind, when we read the beginning of that article, they set up this illustration of this company CEO hopped on his motorcycle, and there was one drone that was tracking him, and it was autonomous. There wasn't anyone flying it. You could develop some sort of defense against that, perhaps. Maybe something on the back of the motorcycle that could fire itself at that drone, take it out. But what happens when you have smaller drones and you have a dozen, 24 of them? You have a swarm of bees is chasing you and you're on the motorcycle. How do you take out the swarm? It becomes much, much more difficult to do. It says, you know what? The swarm will keep coming. This is because the power of a swarm is decentralized. A single strike won't stop it. Sounds scary? It should, because this is the future of warfare. It's called swarm technology. As technology advances, synchronized drones will get smaller and smaller, meaning, yes, they've gotten smaller from when this was written to today in Ukraine, but they're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's going to keep going down. They'll still have larger drones, but they may act as transport drones to take smaller drones to a certain location. There will be all sorts of types of drones, but the drones are going to get more sophisticated, smaller, decentralized, acting with a hive mindset, decentralized brain. And this is going to make them nearly unstoppable. It's already rendered conventional weapons obsolete, as we've seen in Ukraine and as we've seen in the Red Sea. But these are only going to get much more sophisticated and become almost unstoppable. The only other thing that could stop them would be, well, another swarm. And so you can see how this leads to a massive, potentially humanity-destroying arms race, which is what the UN says they're afraid of. And of course, what's going to be man's solution to preventing this devastating arms race? Well, global government, right? If we don't have competing nation states, well, then they won't go to war against each other and destroy the planet, right? That's going to be what they're going to sell. That's how they're going to sell this. It says, in the future, one nation will use them to attack a nation only armed with conventional weapons. What do you think will happen when combat drones traveling like a swarm of bees attack a conventional army? How effective will tank fire or heat-seeking missiles be when directed at a swarm? That's right. They'll be just as effective as firing a shotgun at a swarm of bees. Have no doubt this is where our world is headed. Those nations who are first to develop swarm technology will rule over those nations who are slow to adapt. So again, we're seeing that now in the early stages. If you're relying on warships from World War II, they may have more sophisticated weapons systems on board, but you've got this big floating tub out in the middle of the Red Sea that fires projectiles into the air, large projectiles, and it's facing a swarm of bees. Even if it's facing smaller drones, well, we've seen how effective that's been. It hasn't been effective at all. And one side is growing exponentially in power and sophistication and lowered cost, while the other isn't growing exponentially at all unless you start incorporating these drones into those vessels. But again, that's all they would be. They would be transports for the drones that conduct the warfare. It says, history has proven this lesson time and again. Think about it. Charging columns of soldiers were effective once until machine guns arrived. Racing soldiers on horseback were once effective too until armored tanks arrived. We can all cite countless examples of new military technologies making tried and true weapons and tactics obsolete. The same will prove true with swarm technology. It will completely transform the world's current balance of power. And it's not just between those nations that have conventional capabilities and those that have the swarm capabilities, but as this continues to advance and we see molecular manufacturing, that breakthrough occur, that's when we will see the leading nation establish a global empire, the leading group of nations that may be collaborating and developing that technology. As it says here, conventional wisdom, so this is what the world believes, right? The world believes the doctrine of MAD, or mutual assured destruction, will rule the world forever. In the current era, that may prove true, but it won't be true forever, because a day is soon coming when MAD will be obsolete. We're about to enter a period of time marked by rapid technological change. If you think we've already been living in such a period, you're right, but the past 100 years of progress pales in comparison to what's around the corner. Meaning, probably the next decade is going to exceed, and that's probably an understatement, the next decade will exceed the technological development of the last century. And again, that may prove to be an understatement because we're growing exponentially. Swarm technology is only one of many new technologies threatening to upset the balance of power and render mad obsolete. Technologies like molecular manufacturing will allow nations to scale the size of their military forces. With molecular manufacturing, a nation could create billions of swarming drones at relatively low cost and in a short time frame. Guys, it's coming. We're at the beginning of this race. As I said, every nation in the world, certainly the most powerful nations in the world today, are all engaged in this race because the stakes are the entire globe. As Vladimir Putin said, the winner of this race will rule the world. So we're seeing this play out on the battlefield in Ukraine with the development of these technologies. Again, this is rudimentary, early era drone swarm warfare, but it's going to rapidly advance, and then it will scale up almost overnight with the development, the breakthrough called molecular manufacturing, which I can tell you, most all of the world is completely clueless that such a thing is even a theory or anywhere in the near future. The guys, it's being worked on right now. You can be sure of that. And when it is achieved, I believe the world will find out, because they wake up one day and find out there's a global empire. This group of nations just conquered the world. We didn't see that coming. I think that'll probably be at the beginning of the tribulation. I don't think we'll be here to see that. But we're certainly seeing the early moments of this as this develops. How long will that take till we get to that point? I have no idea. I have no clue. But again, we've been talking about this for 20 years, and we're seeing it play out. Expect to see this play out in the future, just as we're talking about right now, because this is where it's all headed. And the Bible has told us, I'm flawed, I get things wrong, but the Bible does not. The Bible tells us there will be a global empire that rules over every people, nation, tribe, and language on the face of the earth, ruled by the Antichrist during the tribulation period. All that's happening right now is pushing us toward that time. So, guys, take advantage of whatever time you have to tell others about the hope you have in Jesus Christ and about the good news of what Jesus did for us on the cross. How he sacrificed his own life, he shed his blood so that we could have forgiveness of our sins, because none of us ever know how much time we have left. Any of us could die on any given day, but even if you live a full lifetime, you're not going to get hit by a bus tomorrow. I think the time is short if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, because Jesus said, when you begin to see all these things, look up, your salvation draws near. I'm right at the door. I believe Jesus is right at the door because of the things we're seeing right now. So guys, what do you think? Leave your comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, subscribe, and restack buttons. And God willing, I will see you on Wednesday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to visit my Substack at brittgillette.substack.com. There you'll find my latest videos and articles, as well as notes, where I share the latest news headlines, the articles I'm reading, and the videos I'm watching. Subscribe for free, and each new post on Substack will be sent directly to your email. Just scroll to the bottom of the homepage and hit the subscribe button. As an added bonus, your first welcome email will include a link to a copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt Gillette on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.